Hello, everybody. My name is Tan Jagaro, and I am here filling in for no one. Okay, actually, I am just here on my own accord. That's what they tell me. I was told that there's people here that might be interested in a Dhamma reflection. And maybe we'll do some questions afterwards. How do we see like the people that are here? Or
It's just a little number. And maybe people will type in hello and.
Okay, I'm not sure because maybe this thing says people.
No, it will be in the thing.
I'm not sure.
Nobody is writing yet.
I'm not sure if we're actually connected to the right spot.
Yes, you're connected.
We are?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, okay. Somebody did right. Okay, I just want to make sure we're actually live. There's somebody out there. Okay. All right, good. Okay, so we have John and Jayantha and Sid. Okay. All right. So why don't we just do a few minutes of silence, and then I'll share something. So I think we're probably all pretty well practiced meditators. So we can enjoy the silence, and then I'll ring the bell, and we'll start. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Welcome, everybody. My name is Tan Jagaro, and I arrived, just a little over a week ago here to Empty Cloud Monastery, and it's been quite enjoyable stay. They've been taking very good care of me since I've gotten here. I actually came with a pretty bad, feeling quite bad from a cold. And I think today was probably the first day I felt mostly normal. So, and of course, these things change, right? Um, I could, spend a lot of time reveling and finally I'm healthy and I'm never gonna get sick again, and I'm never gonna have to deal with sickness again or any sort of cold or illness. And if I were to go down that way of thinking, this would only result in a lot of pain and grief and suffering, a lot of dukkha. Of course, the reason for this is because just the reality of having a human body or having any body, it's subject to getting ill. This is just its nature. We can't control or avoid it. We can only protect it to some extent, but we don't have ultimate control over our health. And this is something that, so having a proper way of understanding these conditions or experiences they have in life is actually a basis for understanding the Buddhist teachings and ultimately finding a deeper sense of peace and happiness. There's been a lot of snow here this afternoon. Here that we're in Orange, New Jersey, which is about an hour outside of New York. And so there's yesterday, I think in the morning, I want to say yesterday morning was the sky was totally clear. Of course, this morning it started cloudy and snowing this afternoon, and now it sounds like it's raining. And this is very normal. And that one of the the Buddha was very instructive for trying to relate things that we can relate to. Let's say things that are very ordinary, things that are kind of common, and relating it to our experience in a way that we can grow in happiness and well-being. And so I was looking one of these lists today, and it's a list that I'm sure many of you may have known or heard about, the 8 worldly winds. And I really like these because, one, I think it was, touching a lot of just visceral experience of being quite ill and the attitudes we can have around that. But it really applies to, really talking about many of these different experiences and how we can relate to them with either wisdom, which results in an ease, or we can relate to it with non-wisdom and experience a lot of kind of chaos and difficulty and dukkha. And so to go over these 8 worldly winds, they are gain and loss. So these are experiences that we all have. We get things that we want, or then sometimes we lose things that we would like to keep. We have fame and disrepute. So these are, experiences we have in life where we become well known, and people laud us, and people think well of us. Or disrepute. Similarly, like people, may either ignore us or not know about us, or they might think very lowly of us. So these are another axis of the worldly winds. So and the next pair are praise and blame. So, and interactions we have with others, we'll commonly experience people either saying, "Oh, you're so great at this," or "I really like this about you," or they might say, "Oh, you're really bad at this," or "I don't like this about you," or "This really annoys me." And we can these are just common ordinary experiences that we can't avoid. And the last pair is pleasure and pain, and this is um, talking about the kind of how experience actually lands. Pleasure has this kind of feeling of being enjoyable, something that gratifies us. We want the mind typically it's sort of caught up in it and wants more and more of it. And of course, pain is sort of its opposite. It's disagreeable experiences that are frustrating or really actually devastating, depressing, and there's a tendency of the mind not wanting and wanting to push away. And so about all these eight worldly winds, again, the whether it's getting things we want, gain or loss, whether it's fame or disrepute, whether it's praise or blame, whether it's pleasure or pain, all these things we're going to experience as long as we have our senses and a body and living life. We're going to experience these things one way or the other. And the Buddha talked about how these experiences, we can relate to these ways with wisdom or without it. And he often would describe, let's say, like an ordinary person as somebody without wisdom, and a noble disciple is somebody with wisdom. And of course, if we get something we want, let's say, for example, I've got good health, or to dwell in an ordinary person, or the mind that tends towards just not having access to the Dhamma, not knowing what's the appropriate responses to these sort of situations, the tendency would be to, oh, great, I'm finally free of this illness. This is so good. I have good health again, and I'll never have to deal with being sick. So I'm just going to, eat whatever I want. I'm just going to do whatever I want. I'm just going to go out and hang out with a bunch of people, and not, and it can get sort of caught up with not only with kind of foolish activity, but more importantly, it starts to look at experience and not realize that actually this condition is not going to last forever. And the Buddha described when we look at experience, for example, getting something we want, and an ordinary person would not look at this experience in terms of anicca. That is the kind of an instability, or this nature to be not permanent. The dukkha, the kind of, even if you get this, it's not sort of ultimately satisfying. Or in other cases, it actually can be quite, distressing or painful. And viparinama, which basically means like it's going to change. It's going to shift. Right? So getting something we want, it's something gratifying about it, but it's going to change. At some point, my health, if I'm alive long enough, my health is going to take another downturn. I'm almost certainly going to get sick at some point, or if I get sick, I'll get old, and back will start to fail, and I don't have hair to fall out. It doesn't really matter, but other parts of my body will start to fall off, and so this idea around good health and this kind of the grasping around that this is going to just lead to just lots and lots of grief and suffering when it eventually ends. And then similarly, like when we don't get what we want, let's say, or we lose something, the ordinary, the Buddha pointed out, like the ordinary mind, the tendency is to go, oh, why do I have to, be afflicted with this? Why do I have to have, this illness, this cold, this sickness? It thinks it's, tendencies to think it's going to last forever. Tendency is to think that it's going to be permanent, it's going to be fixed, it's the way it's always going to be. It doesn't see anicca, dukkha, and viparinama, the tendency to change. And so the mind tends to just constantly go up and down as it gets things that are gratifying, as our minds lose things or become in contact with things that are disagreeable. And similarly with the next two axes around fame and disrepute and praise and blame, these are inevitable things that as long as we're around other people, or like even if we're not around other people are still going to criticize us, people are still going to blame us for things, and or people might, we actually might prefer not to be well known, and who knows why we suddenly become famous, or people want to seek us out and want to talk to us, and we actually we might prefer just to be left alone, but yet we, for whatever reason, we might get a lot of people's attention. People keep trying to contact us, and so we can't avoid these things. We can't avoid fame or popularity when it comes. These things have their life of its own, and similarly, like all of a sudden we become very unpopular. People start to think we're a horrible person for one reason or another. It's not possible to really have sort of absolute control over these things. I mean, we can influence things to some degree, but ultimately it's out of our hands. And so and then of course praise and blame, these are things that I think most of us experience on a daily basis. It's like, oh, well, I think what you're doing is great. And it's like, oh, okay, thank you. And if we get caught up in that, we're like, oh wow, I'm finally, like, people are finally noticing how great I am, finally. And then of course, so they start criticizing us, like, oh no, I knew it, they really see through me, and they really know I'm a horrible person. And we just go on this roller coaster up and down because as the Buddha pointed out, when we don't see things as a noble disciple would, in terms of anicca, dukkha, and viparinama, in terms of its instability, its impermanence, its inherent unsatisfyingness, right? And its nature to always keep changing. We're just getting taken for a roller coaster. And of course, the last on the list, pleasure and pain. I think one of the things about this is the pleasure and pain aspect, I think, really kind of summarizes the other three axes. I mean, the tendency is we tend to like praise, right? The tendency is to the mind to like, being popular, and the tendency is to like getting things. So these experiences often have a pleasant connotation, not always, but often. And similarly, when people start blaming us for things, or if people start thinking bad of us, or if we lose things, the tendency is to be painful. And the Buddha again is pointing out, and this is, I think, one of the things that can be a bit harder to recognize, but the Buddha is always very clear, very direct. A noble disciple will see pleasure in terms of anicca, dukkha, and viparinama. Similarly, they'll see displeasure or pain in terms of anicca, dukkha, viparinama. Is we're going to constantly experience a flux of different experiences, some of which are going to be painful, some of which are going to be pleasant, and some of which are going to be more neutral in the middle. And then this is not something we can really ultimately control. This is out of our hands. And so, whether it's the weather or my health or your health or how people treat you or how people harass you or any of these things, the Buddha was pointing out that the way out, the way to ease is finding a way of cultivating a mind that can meet these experiences, that can see them clearly, in terms of their actuality. And so, I not that I look forward to being sick again, but the Buddha is pointing out, being healthy is impermanent. It's ultimately not something that's satisfying, and that it's going to change. And in that note, await to whenever next time I get sick and see how that goes and see how long this period of health lasts. And then, we'll see what happens. So I guess I don't have too much more to share. Maybe I'll leave it at that.
Annavayam Dhammakataya Sadhukaram Nadamasem.
Sadhu, 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 anumodami. So this is a time for. So there's some talking or discussion. Or,
Yes.
Yeah,
people
typing questions.
Oh, people typing questions now. Okay,
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. There.
Yes.
This is so. Please excuse me. This is the first time I've done this.
Sometimes people typing.
I think people are. Oh, they're typing the little hand things like this. Okay, I see what's going on. Okay, very good. Okay, Anjali Unicode characters, great.
So, Bhante, maybe I actually have a question. In terms, for example, gain and loss. So, I guess when we're experiencing loss of something, how would you recommend practicing with the loss? Obviously, it's a painful experience. So sometimes we can we're very quick to, if we learn the Dhamma, we're like, all right, well, I know how the noble disciple is supposed to practice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite there yet. So perhaps we're kind of very quick to try not to experience the pain that we're experiencing. And somewhat try to force something, try to force a kind of realization that is not quite there, or that might actually make the experience of the loss even worse. So if you can perhaps elaborate on how to deal with that.
Sure. So just can they hear that, you think, or?
Probably, but maybe best if you rephrase.
Okay, I'll just say it for those, if for whatever reason it wasn't clear. So the question was, there's a question here about what do we do, like, for example, when there's a loss of something that we like, presumably, and we know the instructions, right? We know what the Buddha was pointing towards in terms of this is what the noble disciple would do, and how they wouldn't get caught up with it, they wouldn't get infatuated with it. But when we're not there yet, and we try to force ourselves to be that, it actually can make things worse. Is that the question? And like,
Yes.
what do you recommend? Okay. So, well, actually, I mean, right there to me is there's two really good parts of that. One is that it's like, oh, okay, like I know the direction of what the Buddha was pointing towards, what a noble disciple, how they would respond to loss. They go, oh, this is okay, this is anicca, dukkha, anatta. But we realize our hearts, our emotions, our minds might be, oh, like, why me, or this is horrible, or I can't stand this, and or I it does not cannot accept that, does not want this, it's pushing, it's fighting, it's upset. And so if we try to, and what you recognize something important, if we try to block that out, it actually will make things worse. That's wisdom. That's good. That's good to see that. And okay, I've seen that reaction to that experience. I don't want to do that anymore. And while that may not be so, how do you say, you recognize, boy, that doesn't, fix it. What it is, it's actually pointing towards you're recognizing the wisdom, your development that's taking place. So you're one of the things that I've seen that's really helpful in dealing with difficult experiences is finding some way of adding or seeing, how do you say, it's not denying the painful experience or whatever emotions might be coming up, but it's recognize is there anything good about this, or is there anything positive about this experience? And the reason why that I found that important is because it's almost like it allows that chance for the mind to go, okay, I want to be with this experience. So what I find that's really important, that willingness, even for like 1 or 2 seconds, to be able to say, this is a really unpleasant experience. Is there some way that I can just be with this, right? And so by looking at whatever I can find that's positive about it, okay, let's say we lost, let's say a loved one, right? And let's say they were very dear to us, right? So that experience is going to be, if there's a lot of attachment, there's a lot of clinging to that person, it's going to be totally normal to be a lot of pain, grief, and suffering. And so we can think, well, what can be positive experience? It's like, well, I mean, one is that it's like, well, this person was probably very dear to us, probably because there are good qualities about this person, right? It's like, oh, okay, it's like, okay, this is really painful, but maybe can I just, oh yeah, there's actually goodness that I'm seeing in this, right? That and that's okay, that's something good. Or maybe it's like, this is really painful, but you know, almost everybody, we experience people that we lose, right? And this is a way that I might be able to connect with others now, right? So I'm just giving a couple examples of not denying the painful experience, but trying to bring something and recognizing positive. So with something positive, you can recognize it gives the mind, it can, I'm not saying it will, but it may be able to give the mind enough space to be able to then, I would like to meet this experience fully, because usually the tendency, when there's a lot of aversion, the mind is just like, I don't want this. It doesn't want this at all. It just refuses. It doesn't even want to entertain the idea of being equanimous, right? And so, but it's like you were trying to almost work up the courage. Just can I be with this even just for a few seconds? And that can be quite that just willingness to do that and then meeting that, that can really start to shift things. Again, that, these are just a couple of things that hopefully maybe give it a try. I don't know if it'll help or not, but that's what's helped for me.
Great. Thank you, Hunter.
All right. So let's see, we have a couple questions. Show. Okay, hopefully I did this right. Nope, I didn't do it right. Okay, here we go. Venerable, how to deal with harassment by others? If it isn't permanent, does that mean we should not avoid situations or people that make us feel harassed? Oh, that's a good question. This is from Samrit. Samrit, yeah, in general, please don't hang out with others that are harassing you. I don't want you to be harassed. Come to the monastery. We won't harass you, at least for a little while, and then we might, and then you can leave if we start harassing you. But more seriously, I think what you probably mean is there might be some situations like a job, right, that you can't easily avoid, or maybe your family, or some situations where because of other obligations or other ties, it can be difficult to avoid. Or just, you walk down the street, sometimes you walk down the street as monks, generally speaking, most people are very appreciative of Buddhist monks, at least in this culture. But, sometimes people come up to you and they're like, it can be pretty rude. But it's pretty rare. But yeah, I mean, in general, if it's like something like that, try to use your best judgment to get out of the situation as best you can and try to learn from it. But in the other situation where you can't, it's harder to avoid, like a job situation or a family situation or some other living situation, you're with housemates and who knows what. Those, I think, require more discernment around. If somebody's harassing us, I mean, it can be a lot of things, but my experience, often there's like the other person, there's kind of a feeling, there can be a feeling of insecurity. So they may feel kind of disconnected from you in some way. And so what I found sometimes works, I'm not saying it universally works, but sometimes it works, is if you're like really friendly to them, it can confuse them. And they don't, and that's actually a good thing when you confuse somebody, because the typical thing is when somebody gets in a pattern or something, they're just on a train, they'll just keep doing the same thing because the harassment is gratifying them in some way. But if you can kind of, confuse them, because usually people don't, it's like, they like start, people start like, I don't know, saying curse words at you or something, and you're just like, hey, how are you doing? I haven't seen you in a long time. They're just like, what's going on? Because they don't know what to do, right? People usually don't respond that way. Sometimes that can work to kind of break up the flow. The main thing you're trying to do is you're trying to create an opening where it's different than what their normal routine is. So you can then hopefully connect with them and give them an out to do something different. And you're also trying to make sure that you don't have to explicitly say, but you're trying to make sure they understand, like, yeah, I don't want to, keep doing this thing that's going on. So I don't know, again, without knowing the specifics of your situation, it's going to be hard to give much like advice, but that's the kind of thing that comes to mind. If it's a situation that you can't avoid, try to figure out a way of breaking that pattern or cycle and making it clear that it's like, yeah, I don't want to keep doing this. Let's do something else. Okay, next question is, impermanence is so hard to grasp when you're in a bad state. Thoughts on how not to distract yourself? That's a good question. So yes, the tendency of one tendency of the mind when it's suffering a lot is to eject. And nowadays it's very easy because we have so many. We got these little things. I don't have one. Okay, yeah, the little cell phone things. They have so many things on them. Computers. In the old days, we used TV, right? And of course, before TVs, people would go out, go to bars or, do whatever, do whatever they can to eject. So, I would say the main thing around this, I would say there's two things. One, if you find yourself doing a pattern where you're constantly ejecting in some way, you're constantly finding some sort of distraction when like you've gone inspiration from the Buddhist teachings, that this is not a way out. You need to be good maybe to find some time to either meditate or maybe find some people around that are more supportive or something. You for whatever reason you're finding you're going off into fantasy land of one kind or another. First thing is to recognize that this is very ordinary. You're not, how do you say? I've seen many people like they almost like feel guilty around these habit patterns. Try not to go down that route. Try not, sort of add layers of complication around this pattern you're doing. What you're doing is totally normal. At the same time, you're not going to get out of dukkha that way. You're just going to actually prolong it. The second thing is to find ways of kind of similar to the previous question. How can I interrupt this habit, right? So, and this is where you just have to learn how to be creative. It's like, okay, this is really important. I need to figure out some way of interrupting this habit, right? I have an old friend that I visited recently before I ordained. So I knew him before I ordained as a monk, and I was visiting him, and he had apparently a habit of eating sweets, and so he decided what he was going to do to break up this habit was he was going to put sweets in this little kind of box that had a kind of a special electronic timer, and it only opened the box once a day at a specific time, right? So you couldn't get access to the sweets unless the only box would open. So of course, I mean, he could break it, right? And break it open if he got that desperate. But it was just enough of a deterrent and kind of an obstruction that it broke up his flow. And so again, this is a kind of a technology gizmo, but I thought it was kind of interesting. And the main kind of thing about that, he was putting some sort of interruption in there. He was putting something to break up that habit. And that's where you just have to be creative. You can try to see what other people do. I'm sure there's probably tons of people that, whatever distraction that you're doing there. If you look up online, I'm sure there's, tons of people out there that have similar things that they've worked with. So again, don't give yourself try to avoid the guilt stuff or adding complications. Distraction is normal. But it's dukkha. It's just going to prolong it, and then try to figure out ways to interrupt that habit. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, there's a comment here. It's good to be reminded that habit patterns are normal. Yes. All right. Were there any other questions? Oh, there's a question here at the monastery.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about, it seems like sometimes the reflection of anicca, dukkha, anatta is applied in a way that I'm not so sure is right. When it comes to experiencing loss, pain, disrepute, and What's the other one?
Loss, pain, disrepute, and
And
blame.
And that is saying, oh, well, it's anicca, it'll change. Or
Mhm.
especially damaging, to it seems to me, could be saying, oh, well, it's just anatta,
Mhm.
so don't worry. It's not personal.
Right,
And,
right.
and it seems to me like this has its eyes on, oh, well, don't worry, you're experiencing unpleasant things, but don't worry, it'll be pleasant again soon.
Mhm.
And that doesn't seem quite right.
Mm-hmm. So the question is that make sure I got this correctly. So the teachings applying anicca dukkha anatta on the kind of these kind of more painful experiences, whether it's blame or disrepute or literal pain or loss. You're saying it seems, what's the word you said? It seems off, or it seems not right.
Yeah.
And can you elaborate a little bit more about what's not right about it, or
Well,
what
it
you?
just seems like if you say, "Oh, you're having an unpleasant feeling," but don't worry, it'll be pleasant again soon. Still has like your values set on pleasant is good, unpleasant is bad.
Yes, yes. Oh no, what you said is actually straight up, like really good observation. It actually, if we, the Buddha was pointing out, like if we start to like value one versus the other, that our mind's going to start, going on the roller coaster. You're exactly right. And so along that line, it's not to, if we sort of like, and I think that the what you're getting at is there's kind of like this almost, it's kind of like there's an experience that we're having. Let's say it's unpleasant, and we're trying to almost like whitewash it with anicca dukkha anatta. Yeah, and that's definitely not what the Buddha is pointing at here. And I know I think because I've tried that, it doesn't really work. But I think also socially, like when you hear people like in with, whether it's a Buddhist monastery and Buddhist lay people in circles, sometimes we can hear somebody, let's say, express pain or difficulty or loss or something really quite painful going on in this person's life, and then you just go, oh, it's anicca dukkha anatta, it'll be fine, see you later, right? And it's like, well, wait a minute, that's actually what they're actually saying is, I don't want to hear this, or I don't want to be around it, and they're couching it in language of Dhamma, and that's not appropriate. And so, unfortunately, this happens sometimes. But yeah, that's not. I'm very confident that's not what the Buddha was pointing to. To me, the way I interpret these teachings is that these are like, again, the often the sutta I was going over the worldly winds. He used the uninstructed noble disciple and the noble disciple as these two figures to give us an idea of, okay, if I were free of greed, hate, and delusion, how would my mind respond to this situation? It's giving us a sort of a direction to go in, as opposed to, like, I think what your eyes question was earlier was like, I'm supposed to be this way. Well, no, actually, that's an arahant. If you know what I mean, if they're fully free of this, that's an arahant. You're done with your practice, and that's an incredible achievement. It's also rare, and so so instead, it's more appropriate to think about as that these are directions. This is what, when the mind is when it's more collected, when there's sati, remembering these teachings, it can meet these difficult experiences, and then, for example, the painful ones you talked about, it's not going to be embroiled in this as long as it would normally have, right? So as we train in this, The idea isn't to like not experience this. It's actually, let's say we might experience the loss of somebody. Maybe, like if somebody really close to you, you really value in your life, you may be grieving for months, if not years. That's very normal. If you start to try to practice these teachings, maybe we can reduce it by, instead of 6 months, maybe 5 months or 4 months, right? That's the idea behind this. It's not to, okay, the person I value the most in life is dead, unexpectedly. Anicca dukkha anatta, anicca dukkha anatta. No, that's sort of like, I'd be really worried about somebody if they did that. But it's actually to train in this, using these words to train. And then what happens is the mind goes through difficult experiences with these teachings and starts to see that, oh yeah, these teachings have some use. Oh yeah, like I'm not the only one that experiences this. I can't ultimately control this. It starts to get an intuition around this. It will naturally pick up what the Buddha is saying over time. But yeah, it's not like we can't just like slap it on our experience and expect it to like be like a cure-all. That's who was the monk that learned the teachings the quickest? Like, it was a Bhadia. Does everybody remember?
Quickest?
Yeah, he was like Bahia. Maybe it was Bahia. Yeah, but I think the story of Bahia was that he was like an ascetic, and there was a David that was interacting with him, and he's like, you're not enlightened, but there's this other monk named the Buddha. He's enlightened. You should go. And so the Bhadia went to the Buddha, and he met him on alms round. And Bhadia was like, please, you must tell me, please teach me. And the Buddha was like, look, this is not the right time, come back.
Yeah.
And he kept asking. Bhadia, yeah. And the Buddha, okay, he asked, 3 times is always the magic number with the Buddha. And he recognized that, okay, yeah, I think Bhadia is ready. So he gave him a very succinct teaching of, I can't remember the exact details. It was basically seeing experience as experience. And Bhadia was able to pick up on that really quickly. It was fortunate because not too long after he got enlightened, he apparently died. Killed by a cow. So, yeah, I mean, if you're a Bhadia and you can pick up the Dhamma from just, becoming enlightened from hearing the teachings, that's great. But for most of us, this is a long-term practice. So I would, just, if anybody is saying anicca dukkha anatta as a way of slapping harm experience, that's not. I don't think that's what the Buddha was pointing at. This is a training. Yeah, so I hope that helps. And if there's a follow-up, please let me know if you have anything you wanted to ask another question about that.
I mean, I guess a lot of what I was kind of asking about was rather than saying, don't worry, this is painful, but it will pass.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if it is more wholesome. I wonder if anicca is, how can we use anicca there without placing our values on pleasure being more important than pain?
So the question is, how can we use anicca on painful experience without putting a value on pleasure and pain?
Yeah, well, without saying, don't worry, it'll be pleasurable again soon.
So what you said right there. So instead of only applying these teachings when it's painful, it's actually steady by steadily applying the teachings in all experiences, and that will help the mind start to see, oh, it's not just painful, like extremely painful experiences. It's also moderately painful experience. It's also slightly painful experience. It's also kind of neutral experiences and pleasant experiences and very pleasant experiences. And super, like the mind will start to figure it out if if we can bring this practice in a more steady way, as opposed to only applying it when it's really, because yeah, you're right. Like if you're only applying it in these very peak experiences, it's going to kind of reinforce this idea that I should only have pleasant experiences. I'm using this in a kind of a healing balm way, you know. Venerable?
I was just thinking about that just in my own practice. In the three universal characteristics, as you said, looking at the impermanence, so is given, and just your thoughts, looking, for example, at the impermanence in all aspects of life. It brings this richness and also, for me, a comfort. One, when it is so-called, as I perceive it, as pleasurable, it almost has more of a richness because I recognize this is impermanent. This will change. This is going to change. And when it does change, it's normal. Like, of course it's going to change. And when it's unpleasant, also that realization of this is unpleasant right now, but also being able to see those gaps. It's not a block of something that's not pleasurable. It's not a block of something that is pleasurable. When looking at the impermanence of each aspect, and it's not the solid block. It's constant, like as you said in Aya's question, looking at the pleasurable sometimes when it's very, like when we have loss, remembering those things. And that's, I just your thoughts about using that or kind of looking at that in all aspects. I guess you already talked about.
Well, actually, so just for those that didn't hear, Summer Metico was saying that he found, and please correct me if I missed something, he was saying that he's found it actually quite helpful to see, to remind himself of anicca in very pleasant experiences, because it can help it be more, what was the word you used? More rich.
It takes away kind of for granted. Oh, things are great. I love it. Like,
right. We don't take us for granted as much.
Yeah, like it's going to end.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going
to
to
end.
end.
Like we talked about your health.
Yeah.
So
my health is going to end. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, oh no, but it's true. It's true.
So when that happens, it's for me, like, oh, of course, I have a body. Of course, it gets there.
Yeah. And you're saying, so it sounded like, I mean, that was great what you're saying, but you're saying in terms of the blocks and not sort of seeing just as like painful, pleasant,
right,
but things are constantly changing and shifting. Yeah. And, you know, and this is part of the reason, for example, of meditating, you know, especially on the body, you know, as, you know, like, a common meditation technique is to basically systematically go through the different parts of the body. And one of the reasons for this is because usually we're experiencing a mixture of things. It's not just, you know, total pain or total pleasure. It's usually like a combination of things. And this helps us remind, oh yeah, reality is often this kind of kaleidoscope of different, they're constantly shifting. But did I felt like you said it well, and there's nothing to add.
No.
Maybe if you want to share some thoughts on how sukha is also ultimately dukkha, and how to essentially how to correctly understand that, which I think is a little bit
yes,
rather than the impermanence also of it, but just while we're experiencing
sukha. So the question is from Aya Soma, is how do you have any recommendations for how to see the dukkha and sukha, or the dukkha and pleasurable experiences? No, this is a good one, and actually, it's actually quite difficult for the mind to do this because when we're experiencing dukkha, we're a little more motivated. You know, it's usually we're like, okay, this is really painful. Okay, I need what can, you know. But if we're experiencing a lot of bliss and happiness, the tendency, so I've heard, is the mind will just tend to just drift off and think everything's great. I don't have to do that much, and oh yeah, you know, this Buddhist teaching is great, but you know, I'm just going to enjoy it, you know. And you know, one thought that I have is actually related to Venerable Metiko's observation that steady practice in all situations will help us when the mind, it tends to get into these more kind of automatic states. Like, for example, when let's say it's experiencing a lot of pleasure, it'll tend towards some automatic state where it's just like, oh, this is so great, right? Or whatever it'll be doing. But if we can keep steadily practicing in those other states where we have more, I don't want to say maybe agency, or there's more motivation to practice, it'll start to help it at the edges, right? So that the mind will have less tendency to get carried away, and it'll be more sati in these experiences. Oh yeah, I'm like, okay, yeah, no, you know, like this is really nice, but what did the Buddha say about this? Oh yeah, okay, yeah, this is. He says so. So what is the, like? How can we see the dukkha in this? And you know, like, you know, one thing that I've found for myself. This is an experience I remember having as a layperson. It was a very, very pleasant time where I was on the beach with a bunch of friends, and I was really having a good time. Right, it was really, really pleasant. And I remember I started talking to one of my friends, and I was like, and I started to realize that, oh, like this isn't going to last forever, because, like, you know, because I started to realize how precious this was, you know, like, and then another experience I remember having, this was a kind of this again, as a layperson, it was one of these how do you say, desert parties, you know, with lots of people, you know. I'm not going to say what it was, but
Burning Man.
Okay, well, some of the people said
Everybody's gonna say it for you.
So there was a night of where, you know, people, kind of the major event of this time where lots of things were burning, you know?
A man too.
And I remember I was there, and I remember seeing some ambulance cars come, and I realized that, and I was having, you know, a really good time. It was very, very very pleasant. And I recognized, oh my goodness, somebody is not having a good time.
Right.
Somebody may have got really hurt, or maybe even died. Actually, I found out later somebody did die. So like, it's like, it was this kind of real intense experience where I was like, even if everything is going great for me, other beings can't share in this necessarily. So that really hit me really, really deeply. Yeah. So I don't know if any of those help.
Thank you.
There's a few more questions. Okay. Venerable, how does one overcome the need for physical touch? It gives pleasure which may be fleeting, but at the same time, physical touch by loved ones is healing as well. I assume monks don't touch each other physically to provide support or encouragement. Yeah, I was actually telling, there was a monk recently that was just wanting to give me a hug. I'm like, Venerable, like, please, you know, you know, I'm not, I don't feel it right now. You know, no, yeah, no, you monks, we're human. Yeah, Venerable says we just don't hug. how does one overcome the need for physical touch? Yeah, that's a good, because as a layperson, I really like physical touch, and it's not like I did anything very explicit. I wouldn't say I overcame anything. Go ahead. Sorry, Venerable.
I'm sorry.
Were you going to say something?
Monks, like, I think monks, like, met each other. On
Oh, yeah.
So there's some physical touch.
Oh, yeah.
I think,
There's
like,
massages as well.
yeah. Exactly.
Sorry. The Venerable was pointing out. Sorry, I think I'm sort of trapped in monk land, so I don't. I have certain perceptions. I realize that other people don't. Monks actually do, physically touch each other from time to time, and some are more affectionate than others. Pat on the backs, like massages are quite from the Thai traditions. I don't know. I can't speak for the Sri Lankan or other traditions, but Thai traditions very ordinary to give massages. I wasn't, I tried to, join in some of these massage sessions because these were, like everybody talking, oh, this is great. You get to, be with the Kruba Ajahn and massage their feet and massage their legs. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'll try it. And I just was there and I was like, I'm trying to participate. I'm like, this is a little weird, but like other people, other monks really, really enjoy it. It's a time to connect. So yeah, I mean, I would just as a practical answer, even monks, do this, and others are maybe not so. Maybe I'm something that's not too into it, or um, you know. But it's still it's a way of connecting with others, and I think it's a way of expressing affection and care and a sense of kindness. And so, yeah, I think maybe to answer your question, I don't know if this is true, but maybe this is my intuition around this. Maybe spend some maybe spend some time, maybe after a meditation session, and ask yourself this question: what what is it that I enjoy, or what is it that it's beneficial about being physically touched, right? And the reason why, and try to get a sense for the different aspects of what you're looking for, right? And so I pointed some things out that I've experienced. I've seen some other people experience, namely connection with others, or kindness, or care. It may be different for you, but whatever those things are, then try to see, is there another way that, for example, let's say for me, like care is something that physical touch can indicate. Are there other ways that I can express care, or other people can express care towards me, right? That don't necessarily involve physical touch. So if, again, if that's what you want to do, if you want to overcome the need for physical touch, I mean, as a layperson, I wouldn't necessarily recommend avoiding physical touch. But if that's what you really want to do, I mean, again, I would maybe try to think about what are the things that could meet some of those underlying needs and try to express those. Okay. Dear Bante, suffering of others is unpleasant and difficult for me to deal with. I'd rather avoid the whole situation, and I'm guilty of using this idea that their suffering is fleeting. Is this wrong from the Buddhist point of view, right view, point of view? So okay. Yeah. Avoiding situations kind of out of fear or kind of a reaction is, yeah, probably something, how do I say this? there's probably reasons for this. At the same time, I think you recognize, and what my intuition is yeah, this is probably not something that's going to be a basis for well-being and happiness long term. So I think there's part of me is wants to encourage you to recognize there's probably a reason why you have this pattern, this habit around avoiding suffering. And so I would just try to try to come this out of kind of point of view that's a bit more like, okay, this is probably a long-standing pattern, and it's probably not going to change overnight. And to try to give yourself some time to understand what's going on. So that's the first thing. And I think the second thing is that for me, the quality of compassion is often described as like the wish for other people to be free of suffering. And that's an aspect of compassion. But I think one important piece of compassion that's not often, how do you say, talked about is how do you say, it's like the willingness to meet suffering, right? It involves both of these qualities, the willingness to meet and be with suffering, and the sort of the wish or desire or kind of like oh yeah, I'd like in some way this being can be free from the suffering. So maybe that kind of willingness to finding ways of developing the quality of compassion in general, right? So I think that might be able to help with the situation you're in. And sometimes the compassion is one of the 4 Brahma Viharas. And it's not uncommon for us to, let's say, be strong in 1 or 2 of the Brahma Viharas. And the other ones were kind of maybe not so strong or kind of clueless in. So let's say compassion is something we may be a little not sure about. We don't have much of a tendency towards. But let's say we were really strong in mudita, right? We can actually practice mudita, which may become more naturally to us, and that can lend itself towards compassion, right? Because mudita is like this kind of quality of, like you're just like kind of like you're just kind of like and really enjoying that this other person's like having a good pleasant time, that things are going well for them. You're just kind of uplifted by this. It's just kind of natural. You bring some big smile to your face. Your mind starts to kind of brighten. And so let's say if that's more strong for you, then you can use that and go, like this person I'm connecting with. And then maybe imagine, what if they were suffering with something, maybe that's just, I'm just putting this out as like, as something to play with. This person, like I was really uplifted by, what if they're like had some like a horrible, a disease that they're struggling with, and can I just be with them just for a little bit, right? And so we're using the other Brahma Viharas that we're, let's say, stronger in to help develop one that we're not so strong in. Okay. Okay, I think actually that's it for the questions that I see. It's 8:30. Are we over time? Good. Okay. All right. So I guess we'll end it here.
Sadhu,
sadhu, sadhu, anumodami. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Venerable, just put end
Yes.
end broadcast. Okay, there we go. End broadcast.